Thank you for joining Childcare Challenges podcast and Dilemma in Daycare. My name is Tashieanna O'Connor, and today we have Merrill Gay, who's a strong advocate for us. And I mean, there's no word that could describe how we as educators appreciate you and the stuff that you do for us. And, it's early childhood and all, and we appreciate everything and the stuff that's going on now. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
So I'm Merrill Gay. I'm the executive director of the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance. I've been the director for the past, since 2013, so 11 years. And before that, I was a member of the Alliance and served on the steering committee and as the co-chair for a bunch of years before that. I really got involved in this because, I guess it was 24 years ago when my son, who's now 27, was 3. I got invited to a meeting that I didn't know what I was walking into, but it turned out it was a meeting of a group of folks trying to figure out what was going on with early childhood in New Britain, where I lived. They had a small grant that they were trying to apply for, and they wanted to have a parent perspective, and someone knew I had a 3-year-old, so I got invited. That led to the creation of the New Britain Discovery Collaborative that worked on a blueprint for young children. We documented how few infant toddler slots we had, and that helped to give a little context for my experience, which was when my son was born. We tried to get him into an infant toddler program in New Britain. We couldn't get one, couldn't find a spot. We eventually had to go to Plainville, and then just decided the program there wasn't the quality that we wanted, and fortunately found a family childcare provider around the corner from us who had an opening. So we were able to bring him back to New Britain. But she was a provider for a year until her husband decided to start a business and they needed health insurance. So she closed down her family childcare and went to work at Head Start, where she had health insurance and could get it for the family. So we moved to another family childcare provider. And she did it for another year till it was, my son was turning 3 and ready to go to preschool. And she had sort of concluded, my enrollment's really low. I think I'm going to give up the childcare business. So it was a good time for us to transition to another preschool. He had a great experience at the CCSU preschool until CCSU finally, after years of trying, got the bonding money to build a parking garage right on top of the childcare center. So they closed the childcare center to move it to another place. And he ended up at the YWCA. And it was just like, he went through so many different transitions in his time. And I look back at that and say that, there was a good reason why we moved him each time, but the net result was that he had a lot of disruption in his little life before he started kindergarten.
Wow, with no child to be faced.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to avoid, and have providers stay open where you don't have to go from one to another. With that said, and we thank you for what you've done, and I'm sorry for what your son went through and your family went through. We're going to the election now that just happened with the new elected official for 2025. What in store for providers, for family childcare, for educator overall?
Well, President-elect Trump ran on a platform that was all about reducing inflation and addressing immigration. So he did that by demonizing immigrants, and his inflation proposal is all about, he's going to put tariffs on imports, which means that the prices for customers will go up. A television coming from China or Korea is going to have a 50% tariff on it. It just means that it's going to cost that much more when you buy it. So not sure what that's going to mean as far as the general economy. And we know that a lot of his campaign advisors were involved in writing a document called Project 2025. Once the other side started pointing to it, he tried to disavow it. It's a little hard for me to believe that he won't use any of those ideas. But some of the things that are contained in there are things like eliminating Head Start. He didn't talk specifically about the Child Care Development Block Grant, but he talked about things like getting rid of Medicaid, which is what we call Husky in Connecticut, curtailing Social Security, a whole bunch of things that are all about sort of eliminating a social safety net and reducing taxes, particularly on wealthy people. So how that's going to do anything to help childcare providers, I'm not sure. I mean, it's pretty clear that the Harris campaign was talking about childcare, talking about child tax credits, and to the extent that the losing candidate talked about things and the winning candidate didn't, it's not real likely the winning candidate's going to embrace any of those policies that we saw as potentially helpful.
Okay, and touching back on what you say for importation, and like I said, with childcare, so then should we worry this provider or should we not? Because a lot of people hear about this project 2025, but don't have an idea what it is.
Yeah.
And I know it's not such a lot in immigrant, like you said, Kamala was running and, protecting us, especially immigrants and educators. So what should like immigrant and us do? What should we do?
Well, so immigrants who have become citizens shouldn't have anything to worry about unless they get caught up by something by accident. Trump is promising mass deportations. That is easier said than done, just like building a wall was easier said than done. Mexico didn't want to pay for it. So how that might work, I mean, some of the things that he could do by executive order are things like end temporary protected status for people from Haiti and Venezuela and Cuba. Biden was able to create that temporary protected status in response to natural disasters, civil unrest, etc. That the argument was these folks are fleeing violence or fleeing horrible situations, hurricanes, earthquakes, etc. And they should be able to stay here temporarily with protected status, which means that they could work until things are better in their homeland and they can go back. But that's done by executive order, which means Trump has the ability to just decide, okay, enough of that. All those folks have to go back. Rounding people up and, doing mass deportations is not an easy thing to do and will take a lot of resources to do. It'll be very controversial, but it's certainly something that lots of people are worrying about right now. Somebody told me that their daughter was very upset when she heard about the election results. I think she was in the second or third grade, and she was worried about whether or not her Black classmates were going to be safe. And, I think, sure, there's a concern about that, but probably the bigger concern is whether her Latino classmates will be there or if they will get deported or, decide that they want to try and be further under the radar and not be in school. I know that we have a lot of family child care providers who are living here and working with tax ID numbers. I'm assuming most of them have green cards and are have some status, but those folks are they're in some limbo.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot to take in. So, as we was touching on health insurance, you said earlier, where a provider has to leave from one area to the next area. With the new elect, how can we providers get our voice out there to be heard? So what can we do on our part? Since we already know that Project 2025 exists. We know that the deportation, which a lot of them are worried. A lot of us, I have family that are worrying in TIN, are working in TIN who don't have a status. But TIN is something when you don't have a status, they give you that TIN to work with so you could pay taxes. So you're not leaning on the government, you're not asking the government or anything. You said, listen, I don't have my papers, I don't have a green card, but I'm willing to work. Okay, give me, and I will do any job you want, but I just want to be a part of this country. I just want to show you that I am a contribution to your country. I will contribute tax-wise. I'm not going out there to get caught up into anything. I just want to do it the right way. How can we do it? Because I'm hearing a lot of providers right now that I know are worried and they're scared. I have a provider come up to me and said, I haven't slept for 2 days since the election. I'm scared for my husband, or, I'm scared for my sister, my daughter. What assurance is there for them? What can we do?
Well, I frankly think that the best defense about things like mass deportations is a lot of people being organized to oppose them, to peacefully protest and show that this policy isn't popular. I mean, the number of people who discounted the things that President-elect Trump said by just saying, oh, that's just bluster. Oh, he says that. He's just exaggerating. I'm voting for him because eggs didn't cost $5 a dozen when he was president. I think things will be better then. But, I don't really buy all that other stuff. I don't really think people are eating dogs and cats and stuff like that. It's amazing how sort of Teflon he is when he can say outrageous things and then have people say, I'm going to vote for him. I don't actually believe that he's going to do that, or that he just said that. That's just how he is, kind of thing. So, I typically say when someone tells me what they're going to do, that I believe that's what they want to do. And so, yeah, there's lots of reasons for a lot of people to be worried about what's going to happen when he's there. When he was first elected, the first time around, nobody expected he was really going to win. He didn't really do much advanced planning. He didn't come into things with a playbook like Project 2025. He hadn't organized a whole bunch of people to staff positions within the agencies. And so he had a lot of people who, were career bureaucrats who were filling the roles that political appointees used to, would normally have, because he hadn't filled the vacancies. And there were a lot of people who pushed back when he was trying to do outrageous things. He'll have less of that this time because he's had time to think about how would I do this differently the next time around.
But I know when I was doing my citizenship, right, they said the president signed the law, correct? He could have all the law, he could have the idea that he wants. But what about the House? What about the legislature, the Congress, and the House?
So it right now looks like it's clear the Republicans have kept the Senate, or have retaken the Senate, and it looks like they are keeping the House. They had a 5-seat margin, and each party has sort of flipped a couple of seats, but there isn't like a big change. And it looks like the Republicans will actually now control both the House and the Senate and the presidency, and they've already taken control of the Supreme Court. So they're going to have much more ability to get stuff done than they would had the House flipped to the Democratic control. Now, that said, there's still a filibuster in the Senate. So typically you really need to have 60 votes in the Senate to be able to get anything done, and they don't have 60 votes. So, the Senate has this long tradition that any senator can really threaten to filibuster, and if the rest of his party supports him, then things don't get brought up, because that means that, they'll just bog things down by talking forever.
And I know also, because that's what a lot of people, when I was interviewing people, I trying to let them know that just in case it don't go our way, and they need to think about the House. Because even though he could come with laws in Project 2025, but if the Democrats control the House, then most of those bills wouldn't get passed. Am I right? Am I correct?
Yeah, you're right if the Democrats control the House, but it does not look like they're going to win the House. So that's basically going to mean Connecticut's going to be on its own, that there won't be, lots of new money coming in for childcare from the federal government. It might mean that there are fewer Head Start spaces or there won't be any Head Start spaces. We don't know yet. Head Start has always been pretty popular in Congress, but that's one of the things that Project 2025 talked about getting rid of, along with the Department of Education that does federally insured student loans and stuff like that. So, when I look at Connecticut, things were a little different here. The Democrats picked up a seat in the Senate and picked up a bunch of seats in the House as well. So they have bigger supermajorities. So while the national government is Republican controlled in both chambers of the legislature of Congress and the president's office, in Connecticut, we have a Democratic governor and Democratic majorities in the House and the Senate. So we have a different set of issues in Connecticut, and that is that we have a set of fiscal constraints or controls that were put in 2017 and then renewed last year that make it difficult to spend money even when we have big government surpluses. So the real challenge is there a way to get around those? Otherwise, we are going to have real austerity during a time when the state government's coffers are overflowing. I mean, it's kind of a saying you have no money to spend when you're standing knee deep in a pile of cash is kind of the analogy I've used. It seems ridiculous. And I think that as we see what the governor proposes for a budget, I think there will be a lot of legislators who will be incredulous that, what do you mean we have to make cuts when we have 18% of our budget in a rainy day savings account? We are still bringing in more money than we're spending. And we've set up a whole bunch of systems that keep us from spending money.
All right. Well, those are great information. Now, you got to enlighten me because you know more about this than I do. And whatever else you could tell us, what you could reassure providers, any comforting thing that you could tell providers where it stands when it comes on to education, when it comes on to early education, and anything that us providers could. And is there a hope that you could share with us? Anything whatsoever, anything. Because right now, we are all, especially the immigrant providers are.
Yeah, you're nervous. I understand that. And, I think that this is a time when folks have to work together and build community and be ready to mobilize that community if Washington tries to do bad things to people.
I went today and I went to get my teeth cleaned to the dentist. And my hygiene, she's from Poland. She flee, like you said earlier, back to earlier, you said that immigrant that are fleeing the country for, refugee for violence of war and everything. She told me she and her mom flee Poland because of the same thing. If they wouldn't go out and protest, they would go to jail. And she listened to my podcast, and I told her I was going to have you on it. And I said, maybe they could say something to make you feel better, She said, listen, she was scared. She's like, I'm ready to go. I don't know if I'm going to get to go back home. And, we have immigrants that work in dental office and doctor's office and all kind of jobs, right? They may have, like you said, a temporary status. For her, sitting there like literally crying tears to me today, she's doing my teeth. And she told me, thank you for giving her some reassurance, but I just give her the little that I know. How do you feel about people like those that are not an educator, but are afraid?
So there are lots of people who came here claiming refugee status, who have then had basically our immigration system is so messed up right now that if you show up, with a real claim of persecution and, I am here as a refugee because, someone was trying to kill me back at home or I was being politically persecuted, the process for actually deciding whether that's a valid claim or not is so backlogged that it'll be years before you ever get a court case to decide that. there's sort of an initial screening, and they say, yeah, okay, you might have a valid case. We're going to release you, and you got to come back for a court case in 5 or 6 years. So in the meantime, so she goes and gets a TIN number, and she's, starts being able to work. But the Republicans have been more focused on making an issue out of immigration and demonizing immigrants as an appeal to working class people who feel like things aren't as good as they used to be. Blaming immigrants for that things are not as good as they used to be, rather than, oh, we've totally screwed up the tax system, so the rich get richer and richer and richer, and there's less for all the rest of us. That served Trump well. He got elected. But it creates lots of problems for immigrants, and it means that Republicans were not willing to try and actually fix the immigration system. There was a time 10 years ago or so when there were Democrats and Republicans who agreed we have a broken system and we need to fix it. They didn't succeed in getting it through Congress. But now we've got something where we're not even trying to fix it anymore. We're just beating up on immigrants. I mean, that's sort of really what's happened.
Yeah. So for those people that have asylum, that have the asylum, right? That was granted the asylum. I know they said they have, I forgot what they call it. They gave them like a temporary status that under certain, those people, if you come here under the age of 2, you get the status. But do those people have to worry about that? Would those be revoked? Because that was their question. So she came here young, and they did the asylum, and they gave them that status stuff.
Yeah. So there are a bunch of people who have DACA status. I'm sure that there are concerns in that community of people about what's going to happen next, because the government knows who they are. They registered for that status. And it was clear in the past that there was much more sympathy in the United States for kids who got brought here by their parents and didn't really have any say in how that, went down. And, the fact that many of those kids are now grown, have gone to college, are, working, they have that temporary status that lets them work, but who knows what Trump's going to do? I mean, if he starts deporting people and then you start having employers saying, wait a moment, this is a really good employee, I don't want them to lose them. Or, you start having, it's like, I can't find anybody to do my housing construction because you chased away all the immigrants. Or we have all these chickens that are getting ready to go to slaughter, but there's nobody working in the packing factories anymore because you've deported them all. I hope that we, as a society, react to just the horrors of mass deportation and breaking families up and things like that, that's enough. And that it doesn't get to having to have, business people say, you're taking away all the people who do all the work here.
Yeah, because she was referring to the first time when he got elected, and they was getting up all the immigrants, and especially the Mexican, and putting them back in the truck. So she wanted, and then a lot of people that's on the program you mentioned was worried about going home. So, she really afraid. And I know that some providers also have that program. So if I don't know what we could tell them, if the comfort that you get, I hope when they listen to this and hear this, they feel some ease and some more security that said, okay, you know what, it's not so easy, like you mentioned, to just gather up people and deport them. There's a lot of process to it.
Yeah. I am not an immigration expert, and, I sort of know what I've heard, but I know that the first time around when he, talked about doing a Muslim ban and people like walked to airports to protest, but he did some horrible things, separating children from their parents at the border and not keeping track of who they were. And, you still have kids who were babies when they got separated from their parents and still don't know who their parents are. I mean, that's horrible stuff. And I hope that that doesn't happen again, but I really don't have any way to say whether or not it will. I see why people are scared. I understand that completely.
And we are so grateful that we have someone like you, in there to speak in our behalf, and especially when it comes on to education. Because if you look in, especially family child care home, it's a lot of immigrants that are in this field. A lot of us are in this field, and a lot of us are worried. And go back to it. You said for health insurance, we going like right back to that at the beginning. Now, what is it for us providers when it comes on to health insurance?
So, for many people, the way that they get health insurance is through Husky, which is the state's Medicaid program. There's also something called Covered Connecticut, which is when the state uses the Medicaid money that they've got to purchase private insurance for people rather than pay for claims directly. All of that is made possible because the federal government matches the state dollars 50-50. So you have a $100 bill that Medicaid is paying or Husky is paying. Well, actually, half that money is coming from the federal government to match the state putting $50 up. And during the Biden administration, did a big Medicaid expansion so that they pushed states who had not taken the money the first time around to agree to do it. And at one point, they were paying 95% of the cost for the federal government was paying 95% of the cost for states to adopt the Husky or the equivalent of Husky. That's something that the Republicans have always opposed. Trump said he was going to get rid of Obamacare, but never really figured out how to do it. And, it'll have huge impact if he were to succeed in trying to reduce that because, almost half of the babies born in Connecticut their delivery is paid for by Husky. And there's a substantial portion of the population who rely on that for their health care costs, not to mention all the elderly who rely on Medicaid to pay for their, nursing home bills, etc. So while the Republicans don't like it, that's another hard thing to change because it will impact a lot of people.
Some of them, they would say that when you go through health care, go to Access Health, they said that you make too much money, right? Like when I was at the Capitol with you for the advocates to train them, they said that there was a plan in place that I don't know if that's going to get pushed now since, everything is overturned for a health insurance package. How does that look?
So that's the Covered Connecticut proposal. And then there's also, there has been a proposal for something called associated health plans that base the insurance premiums on the health of the people in the pool. My understanding is it also enables that coverage to not cover pre-existing conditions, which was one of the big things that Obamacare did, was to say, you have diabetes and you are starting, a new job, you really need your coverage to cover your diabetes. But in the old days, before Obamacare, they would say, oh, you already had diabetes. We're not going to cover you because that was something you had before you started this. As somebody who was born with a kidney defect and I've got chronic kidney disease that I manage with medication, but all those doctor visits and all that medicine is paid for by insurance now. If we went back to the, old days of pre-existing conditions not being covered, I'm not sure what I would do.
So when I know I have some provider that's saying they pay $700-800 a month for private insurance. What would that bill that they have circulating help those providers lower their cost?
That is what the proponents of the bill say will happen. I think we need to look carefully at those bills and try and figure out really what would it do? How is it that they get the savings? Typically you get what you pay for. And so somebody's saying, oh, I can do it for a whole lot less. Okay, am I really getting the same thing? Or are you giving me a somehow a cheaper version that doesn't cover all the things that the plan I'm paying a lot of money for covers. My experience with health insurance over the past, couple decades has been that usually when we come up for the annual, benefits meeting, it's that the coverage has higher deductibles and they, change back and forth between one provider and the next. And things got a little worse here. Things got a little bit more expensive for me now. The premiums went up a little bit. That's sort of the way that it's been for a long time now.
Right. And a lot of providers also speak of 401k, retirement. So what do you have any insight and any help on that? Because I personally put aside and started my own private 401k. Is there anything for us there? Anything that
So that is something that the family child care providers who are represented by the union can look at. When you negotiate a new contract, there are lots of things you can put on the table as things that you want to ask for. And, I know that the union has been interested in trying to do what they did in California and get health insurance for people through the state. There has been some movement on that with personal care attendants who are represented by the Service Employees Union, who take care of elderly and disabled people who are on Medicaid. Similar, there's a state benefit that is going to a customer who's employing somebody who's represented by a union, whether that's their family child care provider or that's their personal care attendant. So there's a similarity between those two contracts. And I see that as a place where the union could, and I know is trying to make some progress.
well, there you go. There you have it, provided there's a way that we can actually make a difference is through your union and contact your local union rep and see what they could do with those things. And I don't want to keep you more than I should. I wish we can keep you all night. So is there any final word before we go? Is there anything that we could say to them? Anything at all?
So I think in the next month or so, there may be some interesting developments as far as proposals for this next state legislative session. It's a little early to talk about them, but the Childcare Coalition has been working on things. The Early Childhood Alliance has been working on things. And I think as a stay tuned, there may be a chance to win, fight a good fight in the state legislature and make some real progress.
And if anyone want to know about the Early Childhood Alliance and is there a website that you could say, then we could
Sure.
put
The name is right above me. The website is cteca.org. And then the other organization I mentioned was Childcare for Connecticut's Future, and that is childcare4ct.org. Our two organizations work very closely and we'll be working together this next legislative session, along with the union. The Early Childhood Alliance, I didn't really talk about, is an organization of organizations. So it includes the union, it includes Connecticut Voices for Children, it includes local early childhood collaboratives and school readiness councils. There are quite a few childcare providers who are members of the alliance. Groups like Kayak and All Our Kin and the Diaper Bank and the Infant Mental Health Association. All of those organizations come to the alliance. We work together to try and determine, what do we want to advocate for at the Capitol, and what are the issues facing the industry that and facing families with young children. We've in this past month just completed a survey of childcare programs that I'm analyzing. I'm seeing clearly that programs are having difficulty filling all of their slots right now. And I think that has to do with the impact of inflation on family budgets, that lots of young families are finding it harder to make ends meet. And being able to pay for childcare is something that's makes it more difficult. So a lot of folks are making do with arrangements where, mom is watching her one day and somebody else is watching another day, and or one person's working first shift, one's working second shift, or working the weekends. Families are trying to piece it together without enough money.
And I could testify in that I have a mom just disenrolled three of her children because she has to the family fee from Care for Kids, which was like $500 a month. And I sit there and she's like, you've been not charging me this for so long. I know your work is valuable and you drop my kids to school, pick them up and everything. And, even though I tell her it's not a problem, but, she's like, my grandparents are watching them and she ended up having to sending the kids to Jamaica. So she's like, I can't afford it.
Wow. Yeah.
I'd like to say thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here and so thank you for watching. You can like, share, and subscribe. And thanks, Merrill.
Thank you.